I spent months saving for my brother's wedding gift. Every penny, every sacrifice, every extra shift I picked up at the diner, every night I stayed home instead of going out with friends, every time I chose ramen over a real meal, it was all for him. For them. For what I thought was going to be the most important day of his life. But you know what they say about the best laid plans, right? Sometimes the people you'd move mountains for are the same ones who'd push you off a cliff. And if you've ever felt that crushing weight of family betrayal, hit that like button because this story is going to take you on a ride you won't forget. Subscribe if you want to hear how this nightmare ends, and please comment below if you've ever been stabbed in the back by someone you trusted completely. Because I need to know I'm not alone in this. Let me take you back to where it all started. 6 months ago, when my little brother Jake called me with the news that should have been nothing but pure joy. Amber, his voice was practically vibrating through the phone. She said yes. Miranda said yes. I dropped the plate I was washing. It crashed into the sink, but I didn't care. My baby brother, the same kid who used to cry when I left for college, who called me every week just to hear my voice, who still sent me pictures of his breakfast because he was proud he'd learned to cook eggs, was getting married. Oh my God, Jake. That's incredible. I was screaming. My neighbors probably thought someone was being murdered, but I didn't care. Tell me everything. When? Where? How did you propose? For the next hour, he painted me a picture of this elaborate proposal he'd planned on the beach where they had their first date. Rose petals, candles, the works. Miranda cried. He cried. Hell, I was crying just listening to it. And Amber, he said, his voice getting softer, more serious. I need you to know something. You're going to be in the wedding party, Miranda insisted. She said any woman who raised a man like me deserves to stand up there with us. That hit me right in the chest. See, Jake and I, we didn't have the typical sibling story. When our parents died in that car accident 12 years ago, Jake was only 14. I was 22, fresh out of college with a degree I had no idea how to use, and suddenly responsible for a grieving teenager who looked at me like I held all the answers to the universe. I didn't. I was just as lost as he was. But I figured it out. We figured it out together. I worked 3 jobs some weeks. I learned how to cook his favorite foods by watching YouTube videos at 2 a.m. I went to every parent-teacher conference, every baseball game, every school play where he had 2 lines but acted like he was performing Shakespeare at the Met. I gave up dating for years because I was too tired and too broke and too focused on making sure Jake had everything he needed. College fund, prom tuxedo, graduation party. I made it happen. All of it. And when he left for college, I cried for 3 days straight. Not because I was sad to see him go, but because I was so damn proud of the man he'd become. So when he told me Miranda wanted me in the wedding party, it felt like everything had come full circle. All those years of sacrifice, all those moments when I wondered if I was doing enough, if I was enough, it all made sense. I love you, Jake, I whispered into the phone. I love you too, sis. This is going to be perfect. That's when I made the decision that would change everything. I was going to give them the most incredible wedding gift anyone had ever given. Something that would show Jake how proud I was, how much I believed in his future with Miranda, how much his happiness meant to me. I started planning that very night. See? Jake had always talked about this dream honeymoon. Ever since he was a kid, he'd been obsessed with Italy. He had pictures of the Colosseum on his bedroom wall, books about Roman history scattered all over his desk. In high school, he took 4 years of Italian just because he was convinced he'd live there someday. But when he started talking about the wedding budget, I could hear the disappointment in his voice. They were doing everything themselves to save money. Miranda's parents were helping with the dress and venue, but there wasn't much left over for a honeymoon. We'll probably just go to that little cabin upstate, he said during one of our weekly calls. It'll be nice, quiet, but I could hear what he wasn't saying. It wasn't Italy. It wasn't the dream. That's when I knew what I had to do. A 2-week honeymoon in Italy, flights, hotels, tours, everything, was going to cost about $8,000. $8,000 I absolutely did not have, but I was going to find a way. I sat down that night with a calculator, my bank statement, and a determination that probably should have scared me. I made a plan that was going to require sacrifice on a level I'd never attempted before. First, I moved out of my apartment. Yeah, you heard that right. I gave up my place, the first space that had ever truly felt like mine, and moved into a studio apartment that was basically a closet with a window. My rent went from $1,200 a month to $500. Boom. $700 saved every month. Then I sold everything that wasn't nailed down. My car? Gone. Replaced with a bicycle and a bus pass. My furniture? Sold. My clothes? I kept work outfits and basics. Everything else went to consignment shops. My books, my art, the little decorations that made a place feel like home. Gone. I picked up a second job waiting tables at a restaurant 3 nights a week. My main job at the marketing firm paid the bills. The restaurant job was pure honeymoon fund. I stopped eating out entirely. Grocery budget, $30 a week. I learned to make everything from scratch. Rice, beans, pasta, vegetables when they were on sale. I lost 15 pounds those first 2 months, not because I was trying to, but because I was literally counting every penny that went into my mouth. No movies. No drinks with friends. No new clothes, no coffee shop visits, no subscription services. I canceled everything. My social life became work and sleep and counting the money in my special honeymoon jar. My friends thought I'd lost my mind. "Amber, this is crazy," my best friend Lisa said when I explained what I was doing. $8,000? That's insane. Just give them like a toaster or something, but she didn't understand. This wasn't just about a gift. This was about giving Jake something I'd never been able to give him growing up. The absolute certainty that his dreams mattered more than anything else in the world. Every sacrifice felt worth it when I pictured his face. When I imagined him opening that envelope and seeing plane tickets to Rome. When I thought about him calling me from the Trevi Fountain, telling me about the gelato and the history and how Miranda cried when she saw the Sistine Chapel. Month after month, I watched that jar fill up. $200, $500, $1,000. Every bill that went in there represented hours of work, days of saying no to things I wanted, nights of falling asleep exhausted but excited. By month 4, I had $4,000. Halfway there. That's when Miranda started getting weird with me. It was subtle at first. She'd been texting me regularly about wedding planning, asking my opinion on flowers, wanting to coordinate bridesmaid dress shopping, sending me pictures of different cake options. We weren't best friends or anything, but I thought we got along well. She seemed to appreciate how much Jake and I meant to each other, but then the texts started getting shorter. Less frequent. When I'd suggest times to get together for bridesmaid stuff, she'd say she was busy. When I asked about the dress shopping, she'd say they were still figuring out the details. I mentioned it to Jake during one of our calls. "Is everything okay with Miranda?" "She seems a little distant lately." "What do you mean?" His voice got defensive immediately. "I don't know, just... We were talking about wedding stuff all the time, and now she barely responds to my messages." "She's stressed, Amber. Planning a wedding is a lot." Cut her some slack, I did. I figured he was right. Wedding planning was probably overwhelming, especially when you're trying to do it on a budget. I backed off, gave her space, and focused on my mission. Month 5, $6,000 in the jar. Month 6, $7,500. I was so close I could taste it. 3 more weeks and I'd have enough for the full Italy package I'd found. Flights, hotels, guided tours of Rome and Florence and Venice, cooking classes, wine tastings, everything Jake had ever dreamed of. I was practically vibrating with excitement. This was going to be the most incredible surprise. Jake was going to lose his mind. 2 weeks before I hit my goal, Jake called me on a Thursday night. Usually our calls were on Sundays, so I knew something was up the moment I saw his name on my screen. "Hey, what's going on?" I answered. "Amber, we need to talk." My stomach dropped. That tone, I knew that tone. It was the same voice he'd used when he was 16 and had to tell me he'd crashed my car. Serious, guilty, scared. "Okay, talk." "It's about the wedding." "What about it?" "Is everything all right?" There was a long pause, too long. The kind of silence that makes your heart start beating in your throat. Miranda and I have been talking, and we've decided to keep the wedding small. Really small. Just immediate family. Okay, I said slowly, trying to process. But I am immediate family, Jake. I'm your sister. Another pause. I know, but it's complicated. What's complicated about it? I've been planning to be there for months. You said I was in the wedding party. Things changed. What things? What are you talking about? I could hear him breathing on the other end. I could picture him running his hand through his hair the way he always did when he was nervous. Miranda feels like maybe it would be better if it was just parents and siblings. I am your sibling, Jake. You know what I mean. No, I didn't know what he meant. Or maybe I did, and I just couldn't believe he was saying it. Are you telling me I'm not invited to your wedding? Amber, are you telling me that the person who raised you, who sacrificed everything for you, who has been counting down the days to watch you marry the woman you love, are you telling me I can't come? It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. I was yelling now. I couldn't help it. Either I'm invited or I'm not. Either I'm your family or I'm not. Of course you're my family. Then what is this about? What did I do? Why doesn't Miranda want me there? She never said she didn't want you there. Then why am I being uninvited? You're not being uninvited. We're just keeping it smaller. I was pacing around my tiny studio apartment, my hands shaking. On my dresser, the jar full of money seemed to be mocking me. All those months of sacrifice, all those dreams of watching my little brother start his new life, it was all crumbling. Jake, please, help me understand this. What changed? What happened? Nothing happened. We just realized we wanted something more intimate. More intimate? You have a guest list of 150 people. That's different. How? How is that different? Those are Miranda's friends and family too. And there it was. The thing he wasn't saying, but I was finally hearing. This wasn't about keeping it small. This was about keeping me out. She doesn't want me there, I said quietly. Amber, don't make this about, she doesn't want me there, and you're letting her cut me out of the most important day of your life. It's not like that. But it was exactly like that, and we both knew it. I stared at that jar of money, $7,500 that represented 6 months of my life. 6 months of sacrifice. 6 months of believing that I mattered to the person I'd given everything for. Jake, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Do you remember when you were 17 and you got accepted to state? Do you remember how we celebrated? Amber, please don't. We went to that fancy steakhouse downtown. The one I couldn't afford. But I didn't care because my baby brother was going to college. Do you remember what you said to me that night? Silence. You said, Amber, I don't care how successful I become or who I marry or where I live. You'll always be the most important person in my life because you chose to love me when you didn't have to. I could hear him crying now. Soft, quiet sobs that broke my heart. Do you remember saying that? Yes. Did you mean it? Of course I meant it. Then help me understand how the most important person in your life isn't invited to your wedding. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. When he finally spoke, his voice was so small I almost couldn't hear him. Miranda thinks. She thinks you're too involved in my life. She thinks our relationship is unhealthy. There it was. The truth. Finally, unhealthy. She doesn't understand. She has a normal family. Parents who are still alive, siblings she sees on holidays. She doesn't understand what we've been through. So instead of explaining it to her, you're choosing her comfort over my presence. It's not that simple. It is that simple. Jake, it is exactly that simple. I looked around my tiny apartment, the bike leaning against the wall because I sold my car for his wedding gift. The empty shelves because I sold my books for his wedding gift. The jar of money that was supposed to send him to Italy for his honeymoon. Everything I'd given up. Everything I'd sacrificed. All for someone who was now telling me I wasn't welcome at the celebration of his happiness. Amber, please. Try to understand. I hung up. I sat in the dark for hours staring at that jar. $7,500. 6 months of my life. Years of sacrifice before that. Raising him, loving him, believing in him. And for what? To be told I was too involved. Too attached. Unhealthy. To be uninvited from the wedding I'd been dreaming about since the day he called me with the news. I picked up the jar and held it in my lap. All that money, all those dreams. What was I supposed to do with it now? My phone buzzed. A text from Jake. Amber, please call me back. Let's talk about this. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I turned my phone off and sat in the silence, holding the jar of money that was supposed to buy his happiness. But here's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just break your heart. It opens your eyes, and what I was starting to see was going to change everything. The next morning, I woke up on my couch with the jar of money still clutched in my arms like some kind of twisted security blanket. My neck was killing me, my eyes were swollen from crying, and for a split second, I thought maybe it had all been a nightmare. Then I saw my phone. 17 missed calls from Jake. 23 text messages. Amber, please pick up. I know you're hurt, but let me explain. This isn't what I wanted. Can we just talk? I'm coming over. That last one was sent at 6 a.m. It was now 8:30. I looked through my peephole, and sure enough, there was Jake sitting in the hallway outside my door, his back against the wall, still in yesterday's clothes. He looked like he hadn't slept either. Part of me wanted to leave him there. Let him sit in that hallway and think about what he'd done. But I couldn't. Even after everything, seeing him like that broke something inside me. I opened the door. Jesus, Jake. How long have you been sitting there? He looked up at me with red, exhausted eyes. Since about 6. I figured if you wouldn't answer my calls, I'd just wait. You could have waited forever. I know. He stood up slowly, like his whole body hurt. But I had to try. I stepped aside and let him in. He looked around my tiny studio apartment, really looked at it, for the first time. I watched his face as he took in the bike where a car should be parked outside, the empty shelves, the single chair I'd kept after selling my dining set. Amber? What happened to all your stuff? I almost laughed. You really want to know? He nodded. I picked up the jar of money and held it out to him. This happened to all my stuff. His face went white. What do you mean? I sold it, all of it. The couch, the dining table, the bookshelf Dad built for me, my car, my clothes, everything. I shook the jar, and the bills rustled inside. All for this. All for your wedding gift. What wedding gift? Amber, what are you talking about? I sat down heavily on my one remaining chair and gestured for him to sit on the bed, which was also my couch, my dining room, and my office. Italy, I said simply. Italy? 2 weeks in Italy. Rome, Florence, Venice. Hotels, flights, tours, cooking classes. Everything you ever dreamed of for a honeymoon. I set the jar down between us. $7,500. I was 3 weeks away from having it all saved. Jake stared at the jar like it might explode. You did all this for us? I did all this for you. Because you're my brother. Because I love you. Because watching you be happy has been the most important thing in my life for 12 years. He put his head in his hands. Oh God, Amber, I didn't know. Of course you didn't know. It was supposed to be a surprise. I could feel the tears starting again, but I pushed them back. The surprise was supposed to be your face when you opened the envelope and realized you were going to Italy. Not this. We sat in silence for a few minutes. I could hear him breathing, shaky and uneven. Tell me about Miranda, I said finally. He looked up at me. What do you want to know? I want to know why she thinks our relationship is unhealthy. I want to know what I did to make her feel threatened. I want to know why she gets to decide whether I'm at your wedding. Jake was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. She thinks you're in love with me. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? Not like that. But she thinks you love me in a way that's too much, that you can't let go, that you've made me your whole life and you won't let me grow up. I felt like I was going to be sick. She thinks I'm in love with you. She thinks you're obsessed with me. That you can't have a normal relationship because you're too focused on me. That I can't have a normal relationship because I feel guilty about everything you gave up. And what do you think? He looked at me for a long moment. I think she's scared. Of what? Of you, of us, of what we have. I stood up and started pacing the small space. What we have, Jake, is a family. What we have is a bond that was forged when we lost everything else. What we have is love. Real, honest, family love. I know that. Do you? Because it sounds like you're letting her convince you that the way I love you is wrong. She doesn't understand. Then help her understand. Explain it to her. Tell her what we've been through, what we mean to each other. Tell her that loving someone doesn't mean being obsessed with them. I tried. Did you? Or did you just decide it was easier to uninvite me than to have a difficult conversation with your fiancé? He flinched like I'd slapped him. That's not fair, isn't it? Jake, I have given you everything. Everything. My 20s, my money, my social life, my dating life, my dreams. I put it all aside to make sure you had what you needed. And the first time your girlfriend has a problem with me, you choose her comfort over my presence. It's not that simple. Stop saying that, I exploded. It is that simple. You're either going to stand up for the person who raised you, or you're not. You're either going to honor what we've been through together, or you're not. Jake started crying then. Not the quiet tears from the phone call, but real, ugly sobs. I don't know how to do this, Amber. I don't know how to be someone's husband and someone's brother at the same time. You don't have to choose. But I do. That's what you don't understand. Miranda has made it clear that she can't build a life with me if she feels like she's competing with you for my attention. Competing with me? Jake, I'm not trying to be your wife. I'm trying to be your sister. But she sees how much you mean to me. She sees how much I call you, how much I rely on you, how much I care about your opinion, and it scares her. I sat back down, suddenly exhausted. So what's the solution? I just disappear from your life? No, God, no. But maybe we need to have some boundaries. What kind of boundaries? I don't know. Less frequent calls. Less involvement in each other's daily lives. More space. I stared at him. You want me to love you less. Want us to love each other in a way that doesn't threaten my marriage. And you think the way to do that is to exclude me from your wedding. I think the way to do that is to start now. To show Miranda that she's my priority. The words hung in the air between us like poison. She's your priority, I repeated. She has to be. Amber, she's going to be my wife. And I'm going to be, what? Your former guardian? Your distant relative? The person you used to know? You're going to be my sister, always. But maybe we need to figure out what that looks like now that I'm getting married. I looked around my empty apartment. At the bike. At the jar of money. At the life I'd stripped down to nothing so I could give him a dream. I need you to leave, I said quietly. Amber, please. Let's figure this out together. No, I need you to leave. I need to think. He stood up reluctantly. Will you call me? When you're ready to talk? I didn't answer. I love you, Amber. That hasn't changed. That will never change. Just go, Jake. After he left, I sat in my empty apartment for hours. I thought about everything he'd said. About boundaries. About priorities. About love that was supposedly too much. And slowly, something started to shift inside me. Because here's what Jake didn't understand. What Miranda didn't understand. I wasn't holding on to him too tightly. I was holding on to a version of us that no longer existed. The version where I was the most important person in his life because I was the only person in his life. The version where every decision he made was filtered through how it would affect me because I was the one taking care of him. The version where we were a team of two against the world, but we weren't that anymore. He was right about that much. The question was, who was I if I wasn't Jake's guardian? Who was I if I wasn't the person who sacrificed everything for him? Who was I if my love for him wasn't the defining feature of my life? I picked up my phone and did something I hadn't done in 6 months. I called Lisa. Oh my God, Amber. I haven't heard from you in forever. How are you? How's the wedding planning going? And then I told her everything. The savings, the sacrifice, the phone call, the conversation with Jake. All of it. When I finished, there was silence on the other end. Lisa? Are you there? I'm here. I'm just processing. Say something. Okay, I'm going to say something you might not want to hear. My stomach clenched. Go ahead. I think Miranda might have a point. What? Amber, honey, I love you. You're my best friend, but this is kind of intense. What's intense about it? You sold your car to buy your brother a wedding gift. You moved into a closet. You've been living on rice and beans for 6 months. You haven't gone on a date in years because you're too focused on Jake. That's pretty intense. I felt like the ground was shifting under my feet. I was taking care of him. You raised him. You did an amazing job. But Amber, he's 26 years old. He doesn't need taking care of anymore. I wasn't taking care of him. You were what? I couldn't finish the sentence because I didn't know how to. When's the last time you did something for yourself? Lisa asked gently. I do things for myself. Like what? I opened my mouth to answer and realized I couldn't think of anything. Not one thing I'd done in the past 6 months that was just for me. You deserve a life. Amber, you deserve love and dreams and goals that don't revolve around Jake. My life isn't just about Jake. After he left, I sat in my empty apartment for hours. I thought about everything he'd said. About boundaries. About priorities. About love that was supposedly too much. And slowly, something started to shift inside me. Because here's what Jake didn't understand. What Miranda didn't understand. I wasn't holding on to him too tightly. I was holding on to a version of us that no longer existed. The version where I was the most important person in his life because I was the only person in his life. The version where every decision he made was filtered through how it would affect me because I was the one taking care of him. The version where we were a team of 2 against the world, but we weren't that anymore. He was right about that much. The question was, who was I if I wasn't Jake's guardian? Who was I if I wasn't the person who sacrificed everything for him? Who was I if my love for him wasn't the defining feature of my life? I picked up my phone and did something I hadn't done in 6 months. I called Lisa. Oh my God, Amber. I haven't heard from you in forever. How are you? How's the wedding planning going? And then I told her everything. The savings, the sacrifice, the phone call, the conversation with Jake, all of it. When I finished, there was silence on the other end. Lisa? Are you there? I'm here. I'm just processing. Say something. Okay. I'm going to say something you might not want to hear. My stomach clenched. Go ahead. I think Miranda might have a point. What? Amber, honey, I love you. You're my best friend, but this is kind of intense. What's intense about it? You sold your car to buy your brother a wedding gift. You moved into a closet. You've been living on rice and beans for 6 months. You haven't gone on a date in years because you're too focused on Jake. That's pretty intense. I felt like the ground was shifting under my feet. I was taking care of him. You raised him. You did an amazing job. But Amber, he's 26 years old. He doesn't need taking care of anymore. I wasn't taking care of him. You were what? I couldn't finish the sentence because I didn't know how to. When's the last time you did something for yourself? Lisa asked gently. I do things for myself. Like what? I opened my mouth to answer and realized I couldn't think of anything. Not one thing I'd done in the past 6 months that was just for me. You deserve a life, Amber. You deserve love and dreams, and goals that don't revolve around Jake. My life isn't just about Jake, isn't it? When's the last time you went on a date? When's the last time you took a vacation that wasn't to visit him at college? When's the last time you made a major decision without thinking about how it would affect him? Each question hit like a hammer blow because I couldn't answer any of them. That doesn't make me unhealthy. No, but it might make you incomplete. After I hung up with Lisa, I did something I hadn't done in months. I looked in the mirror. Really looked. The woman staring back at me was thin, tired, and sad. Her clothes didn't fit right because she'd lost weight. Her hair needed cutting. Her eyes looked hollow. When had I become this person? When had I stopped taking care of myself in favor of taking care of everyone else? I thought about what Lisa had said, about deserving a life, about deserving love. And for the first time in 6 months, I didn't think about Jake at all. I thought about me. What did I want? Not what did I want for Jake? Not what did Jake need from me? But what did I actually want for myself? The answer scared me because I realized I didn't know. I'd been so focused on being the perfect guardian, the perfect sister, the perfect support system, that I'd forgotten to be a person. My phone buzzed. Another text from Jake. "I've been thinking about what you said. Maybe we can find a compromise. Call me?" I stared at the message for a long time. Then I turned my phone off and sat down with a piece of paper. At the top, I wrote, "What I want." And then I sat there with a blank piece of paper for 2 hours because I had no idea how to fill it. But here's what I did know. I was tired of living my life in reaction to other people's needs. I was tired of defining myself through my relationships with other people. I was tired of making myself smaller so other people could be bigger. I looked at that jar of money again. $7,500. Maybe it was time to spend it on something different. Maybe it was time to spend it on me. But first, I needed to understand what had really happened. Because something about this whole situation didn't add up. Jake said Miranda thought our relationship was unhealthy. But Jake and I had been close his entire adult life, and Miranda had been dating him for 2 years. Why was this suddenly a problem now? Jake said Miranda was scared, but scared of what exactly? A woman who loved her brother and wanted him to be happy. And here's what really bothered me. Jake said Miranda insisted that I be in the wedding party just 6 months ago. What had changed in those 6 months? I thought back to all my interactions with Miranda over the past half year. The texts that got shorter, the avoided plans, the distance that I'd attributed to wedding stress. But what if it wasn't wedding stress at all? What if Miranda had been planning to exclude me all along? What if Jake wasn't just choosing her comfort over my presence? What if he was choosing her manipulation over my honesty? I picked up my phone and scrolled back through months of text messages with Miranda. And slowly, a pattern started to emerge. Every time I'd suggest getting together, she was busy. Every time I'd ask about wedding planning, she'd change the subject. Every time I'd mention Jake and me as kids, she'd find a way to end the conversation. She hadn't been getting distant because of wedding stress. She'd been getting distant because she'd already decided I wasn't going to be part of their life. The uninvitation wasn't a sudden decision born out of wanting a smaller wedding. It was the culmination of a months-long campaign to push me out, and Jake had let it happen. But why? What did Miranda have to gain by cutting me out of Jake's life? I thought about everything Jake had told me. About how Miranda thought I was too involved, too attached, too much of a priority in his life. And then I thought about the money. $7,500 that I'd saved for their honeymoon. Money that Jake didn't know about. Money that Miranda certainly didn't know about. But what if she did know? What if she'd somehow found out about the savings, about the sacrifices, about the gift? What if she realized that when I gave Jake that envelope, he would know exactly how much I loved him? How much I'd given up for him? How important his happiness was to me? And what if she knew that kind of gesture would make him realize exactly what he was giving up by cutting me out of his life? I grabbed my laptop and started researching. Miranda worked at a boutique marketing firm downtown. The same kind of firm where I worked, actually. Small industry, lots of networking events. Everybody knew everybody. It took me about 20 minutes to find her LinkedIn profile. And there, in her list of connections, was someone I recognized, David Chen, my coworker. The guy who sat 2 cubes over from me. The guy who'd been asking questions about why I'd been working so much overtime lately. The guy who'd joked about how I must be saving up for something big. The guy who'd seen me eating the same sad sandwich for lunch every day for 6 months. The guy who would absolutely gossip about the crazy girl who was killing herself to save money. For some mysterious project, I felt sick if Miranda knew David. And David had been talking about my weird behavior at work. then Miranda could easily know about the money, about the sacrifice, about the gift that would make Jake understand exactly what he was throwing away. My hands were shaking as I reached for my phone. I needed to confirm this. I needed to know if I was right. I scrolled through my contacts and found David's number. "Hey, David. This might be a weird question, but do you know someone named Miranda Walsh?" He replied almost immediately, "Yeah. She works at Sterling Creative. We've done some collaborative projects." "Why, just curious. Have you guys talked recently?" "Actually, yeah, we had drinks last week. She was asking about coworkers, networking stuff. Mentioned she was getting married soon." My heart was pounding. "Did my name come up at all?" "Funny you ask." "Yeah, she asked about you specifically. Wanted to know what you were working on, if you seemed stressed about anything." I told her about how hard you've been working, how you've been saving money for something. She seemed really interested. There it was, Miranda knew. She knew about the money, about the sacrifice, about the gift. She knew that if I showed up to that wedding with an envelope containing the honeymoon of Jake's dreams, it would change everything. It would show Jake exactly what real love looked like. It would show him that someone who truly loved him would give up everything to make him happy, not ask him to give up everyone to make her comfortable. She couldn't let that happen, so she convinced him to uninvite me. But here's what Miranda didn't know. What she couldn't have known. I wasn't just going to disappear quietly into the night. I looked at that jar of money one more time. $7,500. It was time to put it to a different use. It was time to find out exactly who Miranda Walsh really was, and why she was so desperate to cut me out of Jake's life. Because something told me this wasn't just about a jealous fiancé who felt threatened by a close sibling relationship. This was about something much bigger, and I was going to find out what. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called in sick to work. Not because I was physically ill, but because I needed time to think, to plan, to figure out exactly how I was going to uncover the truth about Miranda Walsh. I started with social media. Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, anywhere Miranda had left digital footprints. What I found was interesting. See, Jake had told me that Miranda came from a normal family. Parents still alive, siblings she saw on holidays. The picture he painted was of someone from a stable, loving background who just couldn't understand our unusual circumstances. But her social media told a different story. There were no family photos. None. No pictures with parents, no sibling gatherings, no holiday celebrations with relatives. For someone who supposedly had this big, normal family, Miranda's online presence was remarkably solitary. Her Instagram was mostly professional shots from her marketing job, artsy coffee photos and pictures with Jake. Her Facebook was even sparser. And her LinkedIn, while professionally polished, had no personal details whatsoever. It was like she'd scrubbed her past clean. But here's the thing about the internet. Nothing really disappears. You just have to know where to look. I spent 3 hours digging deeper. Reverse image searches, cached pages, archived social media posts, and slowly, pieces started to emerge. Miranda Walsh hadn't always been Miranda Walsh. Her name used to be Miranda Thompson. And before that, Miranda Chen. 3 different last names in 5 years. My hands were shaking as I kept digging. Marriage records, divorce filings, court documents. The picture that emerged made my blood run cold. Miranda had been married twice before Jake. Twice. Both marriages lasted less than 2 years. Both ended in messy divorces involving allegations of financial manipulation. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what I found in the court records from her second divorce. Her ex-husband, Robert Walsh, had filed a restraining order against her. The reason? She had systematically isolated him from his family and friends, convinced him they were toxic influences on their relationship, and then cleaned out their joint bank account when he finally stood up to her. The court documents painted a picture of a woman who used emotional manipulation and gaslighting to control her partners. Someone who identified men with close family relationships and then worked methodically to sever those bonds. because men without support systems were easier to control. My phone was buzzing. Jake again. I'd been ignoring his calls all morning, but this time I answered. Amber, thank God. I've been worried sick. Have you? My voice was ice cold. Of course. Look, I know yesterday didn't go well, but I want to fix this. Miranda and I talked and... Tell me about her previous marriages, Jake. Silence. What? Miranda's previous marriages. Tell me about them. What are you talking about? She was married twice before you, Jake. Did you know that? More silence. Longer this time, Jake. Did you know your fiancé has been married twice before? That's not possible. She would have told me. Would she? Like she told you about the restraining order? I could hear him breathing hard on the other end. What restraining order? The one her second husband filed against her when she isolated him from his family and then robbed him blind. Amber, what the hell are you talking about? Where are you getting this information? Public records, Jake. Court documents. They're all online if you know where to look. You investigated my fiancé? I investigated the woman who convinced you to cut me out of your life. And you know what I found? A pattern. A very clear, very disturbing pattern of a woman who targets men with close family relationships and then systematically destroys those relationships. That's insane. Is it? Think about it, Jake. When did she start having problems with our relationship? Right after you told her about the Italy fund, right? Right after she realized how much you meant to me? You don't know about any Italy fund. David Chen, Jake, my coworker. Miranda's networking buddy. She's known about the money for weeks. I could hear him moving around, pacing probably. The same thing he'd done as a kid when he was processing bad news. Even if that's true, even if she knew about the money, that doesn't mean what? That she deliberately sabotaged our relationship because she was afraid of what my gift would show you? That she's following the exact same pattern she followed with 2 previous husbands? Amber, you're scaring me. Good, you should be scared. Because you're about to marry someone who has made a career out of isolating men from their families and then bleeding them dry. I don't believe this. Then ask her. Ask her about Robert Walsh. Ask her about Marcus. Chen. Ask her why she's changed her name 3 times in 5 years. This is crazy. What's crazy is that you're so desperate to believe in this perfect love story that you can't see what's right in front of you. I hung up. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. Because as angry as I was, as vindicated as I felt, I was also terrified. Terrified that Jake was so far under Miranda's influence that he wouldn't believe the evidence even when it was staring him in the face. I needed more than court documents. I needed something Jake couldn't dismiss or explain away. I needed to talk to the ex-husbands. It took me 2 more hours to track down Robert Walsh. He was living in Portland now, working as a graphic designer. His Facebook profile showed pictures of him with a new girlfriend, looking happy and healthy. I sent him a message explaining who I was and why I was contacting him. I expected him to ignore me or tell me to mind my own business. Instead, he called me within 20 minutes. Is she really getting married again? His voice was tired, sad. You sound like you expected this. I hoped she'd gotten help. I hoped maybe she'd changed. But deep down, yeah. I expected this. Can you tell me what happened? Between you and Miranda? Robert was quiet for a long moment. How much time do you have? For the next hour, Robert Walsh told me a story that was so similar to what was happening with Jake that it made me sick. Miranda had met him at a work conference. She was charming, beautiful, interested in his life. She seemed fascinated by his close relationship with his sister and his parents. At first, then slowly, she started pointing out problems. His sister was too demanding. His parents were too involved in his decisions. His friends took advantage of his generosity. She never said I shouldn't see them, Robert explained. She was too smart for that. Instead, she'd create conflicts. She'd schedule important things on family birthdays. She'd pick fights right before we were supposed to see my sister. She'd get sick whenever we had plans with my parents. It got worse from there. Miranda convinced Robert that his family didn't support their relationship. She showed him evidence of things they'd supposedly said about her. She made him choose between her comfort and their presence, over and over again. "And I chose her," Robert said, his voice thick with regret. "Every time I chose her. Because I loved her, and she convinced me that love meant protecting her from people who didn't understand us." "What happened when you finally realized what she was doing?" "It took 2 years. 2 years of losing everyone who mattered to me. And by the time I figured it out, I was completely isolated. No friends, no family support, no one to turn to when things got really bad." "How bad did they get?" "She cleaned out our savings account and disappeared for 3 days. When she came back, she acted like nothing had happened. Said the money was for a surprise she was planning. But I knew. I finally knew." "That's when you filed for divorce?" "That's when I tried to. But she fought it every step of the way. Claimed I was abusive, that I was controlling, that I'd isolated her from her family. She turned everything around and made herself the victim. But you got the restraining order. Only after she broke into my apartment and destroyed everything that connected me to my family. Photos, letters, gifts from my sister, everything. She said if she couldn't have me, no one could. Especially not my family." I felt like I was going to throw up. "Robert, I need to ask you something. Did Miranda ever talk about having a normal family? Parents, siblings?" He laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Miranda doesn't have a family, Amber. That's the whole point. She targets men who do have families because she wants what they have. And when she can't integrate herself into those relationships, she destroys them." "What do you mean she doesn't have a family?" "Her parents died when she was young. She grew up in foster care. Bounced around a lot. I think that's where she learned to manipulate people. It was a survival skill. But instead of getting help to heal from that trauma, she just weaponized it. Everything clicked into place. Miranda wasn't jealous of my relationship with Jake because she thought it was unhealthy. She was jealous because she'd never had what we had. She'd never experienced unconditional love, family loyalty, the security of knowing someone would always be there. And instead of trying to build that for herself, she was destroying it for everyone else. "There's something else," Robert said. "Something you need to know if your brother is really going to marry her." "What?" "She doesn't just isolate people from their families. She studies them first. Learns everything about their relationships, their dynamics, their weaknesses, and then she uses that information to drive wedges between people. How? She'll tell you things your family supposedly said about you. She'll create situations where they look bad. She'll manipulate conversations to make it seem like they don't support you. She's incredibly good at it." I thought about Jake's phone call. About him saying Miranda felt our relationship was unhealthy. About him using words like obsessed and too attached. Words that sounded suspiciously like things Miranda might have planted in his head. "Robert, has she contacted you recently?" "What do you mean?" "I mean in the past few months. Has she reached out at all?" "Actually, yeah. About 3 months ago, she sent me a Facebook message. Said she was getting married and wanted to apologize for how things ended between us. Wanted to make amends. 3 months ago, right around the time Miranda started getting distant with me." "What did you tell her?" "I told her I appreciated the apology, but that I didn't want any contact with her. I blocked her after that." "Did she ask you anything specific? About your family? About what went wrong between you?" Yeah, actually. She asked about my sister. Wanted to know if we'd reconciled after the divorce. Asked what it was like to rebuild that relationship. She was studying, learning, figuring out how to perfect her technique. After I hung up with Robert, I sat in my empty apartment staring at that jar of money. $7,500 that was supposed to send Jake and Miranda to Italy for their honeymoon. But Jake wasn't going to marry Miranda. Not if I could help it. I called Marcus Chen next. His story was almost identical to Robert's, but worse. Miranda had convinced Marcus that his elderly parents were trying to control his life, that his weekly dinners with them were codependent and unhealthy. She'd isolated him so completely that when his father had a heart attack, Marcus almost didn't go to the hospital because Miranda had convinced him it was just another manipulation tactic. His father died while Marcus was deciding whether or not to believe his mother's lies about the heart attack, Marcus. had never forgiven himself. Or Miranda. She stole more than my money, he told me, his voice broken. She stole my last chance to say goodbye to my dad. She made me miss the most important moment of my life because I was too brainwashed to see through her manipulation. By the time I finished talking to both ex-husbands, I had a complete picture of who Miranda really was, and I knew exactly what I had to do. I took half the money from the jar, $3,750, and bought a plane ticket to Portland. Not because I needed to see Robert in person, but because I needed Jake to think I was gone. I needed him to have some time alone with Miranda. Time for her to show her true colors without me there to blame for everything. Then I used the rest of the money for something else entirely. I hired a private investigator. Not to dig up more dirt on Miranda. I had enough of that. But to document what was happening. To get evidence of her manipulation that would hold up in court if it came to that. Because I had a feeling it was going to come to that. The investigator I hired? Sarah Martinez, specialized in domestic manipulation cases. She knew exactly what to look for, how to document emotional abuse, how to build a case that would protect victims from their abusers. "This is textbook," she said after I'd shown her everything I'd found. "She's what we call a family destroyer. They specifically target people with strong family bonds because those are the relationships that pose the biggest threat to their control." Can you help me stop this? I can help you document what's happening. But ultimately, your brother has to make the choice to see the truth. And if he doesn't? Sarah looked at me with sad, experienced eyes. Then he'll learn the hard way, just like her other victims did. But I wasn't going to let that happen. Not to Jake. Not after everything we'd been through together. I spent the next week gathering evidence. Financial records showing Miranda's pattern of draining joint accounts. Testimony from both ex-husbands. Court documents. A psychological profile from an expert who specialized in manipulative personality disorders. And then I did something that terrified me. I called Jake. "Amber? Where are you? I've been trying to reach you for days. I'm in Portland." I needed some time to think. Portland? What's in Portland? Robert Walsh. Silence. "You talked to him," Jake said finally. I did. "And to Marcus Chen. Jake, everything I told you is true. Miranda has done this before, twice." She explained everything. My heart sank. Explained what? The marriages? She told me about them. She said she was young and made mistakes, but that what we have is different. And the restraining order? She said Robert was abusive, that he filed false charges when she tried to leave him. Of course she turned it around. "Jake, I need you to listen to me. Really listen. Miranda is not who you think she is. Amber, I love you. You know I do. But I can't keep doing this. I can't keep choosing between you and the woman I want to marry. I'm not asking you to choose. I'm asking you to see the truth. Your truth. Your version of what's happening. The truth. Backed up by court documents, police reports, and 2 men whose lives she destroyed." "She's getting help," Jake said suddenly. "What?" "Miranda. She's seeing a therapist? She told me about her past, about her childhood, about why she has trust issues. She's working on it." I felt a chill run down my spine, because that's exactly what a skilled manipulator would do. Admit to just enough truth to seem vulnerable and honest, while painting themselves as the victim working hard to change. "Jake, when did she start therapy?" "A few months ago, right after we got engaged, right after she'd decided to start isolating him from me. Has she asked you to go with her? To couples counseling?" She said it would be better if she worked on her individual issues first. Of course she did. Because couples counseling would expose her manipulation tactics. "Jake, I'm coming home. We need to talk face to face." "No. Amber, I can't. Miranda. She says she can't handle the stress of this conflict right now. She's having panic attacks." "Panic attacks?" "She's been hospitalized twice this week. The doctor says it's anxiety related to wedding stress and family drama." Family drama. Like I was some distant relative causing problems instead of the woman who'd raised him. "Jake, those aren't panic attacks. That's manipulation." "How can you say that? You've never even met her doctor." "Because this is part of the pattern. She's making herself the victim, making you the protector, making me the villain. Don't you see what's happening?" What I see is my sister trying to destroy my relationship because she can't let me grow up. The words hit me like a physical blow. Because they weren't Jake's words. They were Miranda's words, coming out of Jake's mouth. "Jake," I said quietly, "do you remember what you said to me the night before you left for college?" "Amber, don't." "You said, 'I know I'm leaving, but you'll always be the most important person in my life.' Because you didn't have to love me, but you chose to anyway. And that choice made me who I am." I could hear him crying now. "You said that loving someone means protecting them, even when it's hard. Even when other people don't understand. Things change, Amber. Love doesn't change, Jake. People who manipulate you into believing love is a threat. They change how you see love. But love itself doesn't change. I have to go." "Jake, wait." But he'd already hung up. I sat in that Portland hotel room holding my phone and realized I'd lost him. Maybe not forever, but for now. Miranda had won this round. But here's the thing about people like Miranda. They always overplay their hand eventually. They get so confident in their control that they make mistakes, and I was going to be there when she made hers. I flew back to New York that night and went straight to my apartment. There were 17 voicemails waiting for me. 15 were from Jake. 2 were from numbers I didn't recognize. The first unknown number was Sarah, my private investigator. "Amber, call me as soon as you get this. I've found something big." The second was a woman's voice I'd never heard before. "Hi, you don't know me, but my name is Jessica Chen. Marcus Chen is my brother. He told me you've been asking questions about Miranda Thompson, or Walsh, or whatever she's calling herself now. I need to talk to you. It's important. Jessica Chen." Marcus hadn't mentioned a sister. I called her first. "Thank God," she said when I identified myself. "I've been trying to figure out how to find you for days." "What's going on?" "Miranda contacted me 3 weeks ago. My blood went cold." "What?" "She said she was doing some kind of therapy homework, making amends to people she'd hurt. She wanted to apologize for coming between Marcus and our family." "What did you tell her?" "I told her to go to hell. But then she said something that made me realize she wasn't just apologizing. She was gathering information." "What kind of information?" "She asked about you. Specifically about you. She wanted to know if Marcus had ever mentioned knowing someone named Amber who was really close to her brother. She described your relationship with Jake perfectly, too perfectly. My hands were shaking." "What did you tell her?" "Nothing. I hung up. But then I started thinking about it, and I realized she's doing it again. She's found another target, and she was using Marcus to get information about how to destroy your relationship with your brother." Everything clicked into place. Miranda hadn't just stumbled onto the information about my savings through David Chen. She'd been researching me for months. Studying my relationship with Jake, learning our patterns, our history, our weak spots. She'd been planning this campaign from the very beginning. I called Sarah next. "I was hoping you'd call tonight," she said. "I've been surveilling Miranda for the past week, and you're not going to believe what I found." "Try me." "She's not in therapy." "The doctor visits your brother mentioned?" "They're to a cosmetic surgeon. She's been getting work done in preparation for the wedding." "That's weird, but not exactly evidence of manipulation. That's not the big thing. The big thing is where she goes after the doctor visits." "Where?" "To meet with a man named David Reeves." Ring any bells? It didn't. David Reeves is a divorce attorney who specializes in high-asset cases. Miranda has been meeting with him twice a week for the past month. My heart stopped. She's planning to divorce Jake? Before they even get married. They're discussing prenups, asset protection, and this is the really sick part. Strategies for claiming emotional abuse if he tries to fight the divorce. I felt like I was going to pass out. Sarah, she's not just trying to isolate Jake from his family. She's planning to destroy him financially and then claim he abused her. That's exactly what she's doing. And based on the timeline, I'd say she's planning to file for divorce about 6 months after the wedding. Just long enough to establish a pattern of abuse and claim entitlement to half his assets. We have to stop this. We have to warn him. Whether he believes it or not is up to him. I hung up and immediately called Jake. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail. I tried texting. No response. Finally, I called his work number, Jake Peterson's office. Hi, this is his sister. Is he available? Oh, I'm sorry. Jake called in sick today. And tomorrow. He said he was dealing with a family emergency. A family emergency. While Miranda was meeting with divorce lawyers, I knew what I had to do. I drove to Jake's apartment. If he wouldn't take my calls, I'd make him listen to me face to face. But when I got there, his neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, was putting mail back in his mailbox. Oh, Amber. I was wondering when you'd be by. Hi, Mrs. Rodriguez. Is Jake home? Oh, honey, he and Miranda left this morning. Had a bunch of suitcases. Said they were going away for a few weeks before the wedding. My heart started racing. Going where? I don't know, sweetheart. But they seemed to be in quite a hurry. Miranda was moving to the final phase of her plan. She'd isolated Jake from me, convinced him I was the problem. And now she was physically removing him from anyone who might interfere with the wedding. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated how well I knew my brother, Jake. Might be under her influence, but he wasn't stupid. And there was one thing. One single thing that Miranda couldn't fake or manipulate away. Jake's heart. I went home and did something I probably should have done months ago. I wrote Jake a letter. Not an email or a text that Miranda could intercept and delete. A real, physical letter that would have to be delivered to his hands. In that letter, I told him everything. Not just about Miranda's past, but about us. About our history, our bond, about why I'd made the choices I'd made. I told him about the nights I'd stayed awake when he was sick as a teenager, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I told him about the job I'd turned down in California, because it would have taken me too far away from him. I told him about the men I'd stopped dating because they didn't understand why my brother mattered so much to me. I told him about the Italy fund, about every sacrifice I'd made, not because I expected anything in return, but because his happiness had always been worth more to me than my comfort. And then I told him the truth about Miranda. All of it. The evidence, the patterns, the plan to divorce him and claim abuse. But most importantly, I told him that I loved him enough to let him make his own choice. Even if that choice broke my heart, I ended the letter with this. Jake, I don't know if Miranda will let you read this. I don't know if you'll believe me even if you do. But I need you to know that everything I've ever done has been because I love you. Not because I want to control you, not because I can't let you go, but because you are the best thing that ever happened to me. If you choose Miranda, I'll respect that choice. But if you ever need me, if you ever realize that the people who love you aren't your enemies, I'll be here. I'll always be here. The jar of money is still sitting on my dresser. It was supposed to be for Italy, but now I think I'll use it for something else. I'm going to use it to build a life for myself. The life you and Lisa think I deserve. Maybe you're both right. Maybe it is time for me to figure out who I am when I'm not just your guardian. But Jake, I need you to know, being your guardian was never a burden. It was a privilege. You didn't ruin my life by needing me. You gave my life meaning. I hope someday you'll understand the difference. I love you. Always, Amber. I sealed the letter and drove to Jake's office. I couldn't mail it to his apartment because Miranda would intercept it. But I could give it to his secretary and ask her to hold it until he came back. Of course, hon, she said when I explained. I'll make sure he gets it the minute he walks in. Then I went home and did something I hadn't done in 6 months. I started living my life. I called Lisa and made dinner plans. I went shopping for clothes that actually fit. I looked into taking some classes, maybe learning a new skill. And slowly, day by day, I started to remember who Amber was when she wasn't defined entirely by her relationship with Jake. It was terrifying. But it was also liberating. 3 weeks later, my phone rang at 2 a.m. Amber? Jake's voice was shaking. Jake? Where are you? Are you okay? I'm at the airport. I'm coming home. What happened? You were right. About everything. Oh God, Amber, you were right about everything. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. What happened? Miranda, she showed me her true face tonight. And it was exactly what you said it would be. Jake, where are you? I'm coming to get you. JFK, Terminal 4. I'll be there in an hour. I threw on clothes and drove to the airport, my hands shaking the entire time. When I found Jake, he was sitting in the terminal looking like he'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks. He saw me coming and started crying. I'm so sorry, he said as I sat down next to him. I'm so fucking sorry. What happened? We were in Vegas. She wanted to elope, said it would be more romantic than a big wedding. And I almost went through with it. What stopped you? Your letter. My secretary forwarded it to me. Miranda tried to delete it, but I'd already read it. And I started paying attention. Really paying attention to the things she said, the way she talked about you, the way she talked about everyone I cared about. Jake told me about the past 3 weeks, about how Miranda had systematically badmouthed every person in his life, about how she'd accidentally deleted phone numbers from his contacts, about how she'd thrown a screaming fit when he'd suggested they invite a few friends to the Vegas ceremony. But the thing that really opened my eyes, he said, was when I told her about the money. About your Italy fund. What did she say? She said you were pathetic. She said only a woman with serious mental health issues would sacrifice her life for someone who didn't want her around. She said you were probably in love with me and that giving me that money would have been your way of trying to buy my affection. I winced. And then she said the worst thing of all. She said she was glad you wouldn't be at the wedding because watching you give me that money would have been embarrassing for everyone involved. Jake looked at me with tears in his eyes. She called your love pathetic. Amber. Your sacrifice, your generosity, your devotion to my happiness. She called it pathetic. And that's when I finally understood what you'd been trying to tell me. What's that? Someone who truly loves you doesn't ask you to see love as a threat. Someone who truly loves you celebrates the people who made you who you are. We sat in that airport for 3 hours talking. Really talking, for the first time in months. Jake told me about how Miranda had slowly isolated him from everyone, how she'd made him doubt his own memories and perceptions, how she'd convinced him that questioning her was a sign of disloyalty, and I told him about what I'd learned. About her pattern, her past, her plan to divorce him and claim abuse. Jesus, he said when I finished. I could have lost everything. But you didn't. You figured it out in time. Only because you saved me. Again. I looked at my little brother, the man I'd raised, the person I'd sacrificed everything for, the human being I loved most in the world, and realized something profound. All those people who'd told me I was too involved, too attached, that my love was unhealthy, they were wrong. My love for Jake had literally saved his life. Not because it was possessive or controlling or obsessive, but because it was real. It was unconditional. It was the kind of love that sees through manipulation and fights for truth, even when fighting hurts. Miranda had counted on me being too unhealthy to be believed. She'd counted on Jake being so convinced that our relationship was problematic that he wouldn't listen when I warned him. But love, real love, is stronger than manipulation. So what happens now? I asked. Now I go home and figure out how to rebuild the life I almost threw away. Jake looked at me, starting with apologizing to the person who never stopped fighting for me, even when I didn't deserve it. You always deserved it, Jake. That's what you never understood. You didn't have to earn my love. You just had to accept it. We went back to my apartment as the sun was coming up. Jake looked around at my tiny space. At the bike, at the jar that still held what was left of the Italy money. I'm going to pay you back, he said. Every penny you spent, every sacrifice you made. I'm going to make it right. You don't have to. Yes, I do. But more than that, I want to. I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you know how much you mean to me, how grateful I am, how sorry I am that I ever made you doubt it. I looked at that jar one more time. There was still about $4,000 left after my investigative expenses and the Portland trip. You know what? I said. I have a better idea. What's that? We're going to Italy, both of us. Brother and sister trip. We're going to see the Colosseum and eat gelato and remember what it feels like to be happy. Jake's face lit up like Christmas morning. Really? Really. Consider it your getting away from a sociopathic manipulator gift. He laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. And as I watched him laugh, I realized something beautiful. I hadn't just saved Jake from Miranda. I'd saved myself too. From a life defined entirely by other people's needs. From a love so focused on sacrifice that it forgot about joy. From the belief that I had to choose between loving my brother and loving myself. The truth was, I could do both. I could love Jake completely and still build a life for myself. I could be devoted to his happiness while also pursuing my own. I could be the sister who would always be there while also being the woman who had her own dreams. Miranda had been wrong about a lot of things. But she'd been right about one thing. I did deserve a life. I just didn't have to give up Jake to get it. 3 months later, Jake and I were standing in front of the Trevi, fountain in Rome. We threw coins over our shoulders and made wishes. I wished for Jake to find real love someday, the kind that celebrated who he was instead of trying to change him. When I asked him what he wished for, he smiled and said, I wished for my sister to be as happy as she's made me. And you know what? I think we're both going to get our wishes.